Good morning, dear students. Hope you are okay by the grace of Almighty Allah. Welcome to AMC online class on behalf of Department of English. Today's class is assigned for the students of honors first year. Dear learners, today's course is Introduction to Poetry and topic is Ulysses. The poem Ulysses is written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. As you have studied already some ideas about different types of poems and poets. Tennyson's belongs to a Victorian age. The Victorian age extends the period from 1837 to 1901. Victorian age is the very remarkable age in the history of English literature, and Tennyson is the representative poet of Victorian age. He is also a poet laureate of that era. He is the spokesman of Victorian age. Let us know some historical background or some salient features of Victorian age. In Victorian age, England reached its peak of success. People were in quest of knowledge. The country was expanding its domination in the field of science and technology, medical science, and exploring different parts of the world. England at the time was succeeding very dramatically. That is, England was very successful in scientific achievement, and people are dreaming of material success or achievement. That's why people are doubting the existence of faith, that is, or religion. Consequently, the conflict between religion and science resulted in the lives of human beings. So, ultimately, the status of women in that period was very negligible. That is, women suffered a lot. Women are regarded just as the source of pleasure and domestic work. People are also struggling for democracy. That's why the crisis of democracy is also trait of Victorian age. That is the conflict between democracy and autocracy. That is the supremacy of royal people are also prevalent in that period. Okay, so the major trend conflict between religion and science shattered the stability and religious values of the people. The origin of the species, that is Darwin's theory of evolution, ultimately changed the people's mind setup. The people are very much religious, but ultimately scientific improvement and Darwin's theory shattered people's belief in religions. So Tennyson also suffered a tragic death of his close friend Arthur Hallam. Whenever his friend Arthur Hallam met his tragic death, Tennyson felt very shocked. That's why he began writing. But whenever he wrote this poem, Ulysses, he wanted to turn his tragic feelings or emotions into mental strength. That's why, ultimately, to turn despair into energetic power of his mental ability turns into a national poem, not only his personal poem. Ulysses is a mythological character. The title of the poem is quoted from the mythological character Ulysses. In Roman, it is called Ulysses, but in Greek, it is called Odysseus. That is, in Homer's Iliad, the story or mythological characters of Ulysses are narrated in detail. So Ulysses is a heroic character. You know, he fought bravely in the Trojan War, and he was very renowned for creating the idea of Trojan horse. That's why he was very cunning. The phrase Trojan horse is also used today as technique or strategy for succeeding in a deceitful way or in a cunning way. But why Tennyson introduced this type of mythological character in his age or in his writing? Actually, Tennyson quoted or has taken some mythological characters to express his ideas regarding his own age. Okay, in the poem, we see that Ulysses, after fighting for 10 years, he was returning to his native land Ithaca. Ulysses was the king of Ithaca. He had a wife named Penelope, and he had a son also named Telemachus. After 10 years, whenever he reached his home, he found his wife old and his son had become a grown up man. His son was ruling the country. But he found that very life, domestic life, is very boring. As he was a brave and courageous man, he was fond of adventures. He fought bravely with men and gods. That's why he did not find pleasure in running domestic life or leading some uncivilized men of the country. That's why once again he addressed his fellow mariners to start a new voyage on the sea. From this turn, the poem started. Through the character of Ulysses, Tennyson wants to focus on the spirit of his people in that period in England. People also are very much courageous, they are adventurous. As I told you earlier, just now, that in Victorian age, England was expanding. English people are also very much thirsty for knowledge. They were exploring different branches of knowledge also. That's why that very spirit of yearning for knowledge is a dominating trend in that period, and that very spirit is also highlighted in the poem Ulysses by Tennyson. As Tennyson was the also national poet, he is a representative poet of England. Okay, in the poem also we find the conflict between religion and science. As it is a longer poem, that's why the reading of the poem line by line is somewhat boring, but as a student, you have to go through some important lines of the poem definitely. So, at the very beginning, we find it little profits. That is, there is no pleasure, there is no source of enjoyment or benefit of leading a domestic life or a common life. Rather, the poet or the speaker Ulysses wants to point out to the new adventurous journey. In the poem, the poet Tennyson used the technique of dramatic monologue. Yes, Ulysses is also a dramatic monologue in the form, but as developed by Robert Browning in a dramatic monologue, we find psychological crisis of the speaker, tension. But in the poem, we don't find such type of conflict or psychological tension in the poem. Okay, the some common features of dramatic monologue we also can notice in the poem. For example, abrupt beginning, single speaker and a silent listener, conversational dialogue. These are some common features of dramatic monologue we can also find. The other important feature of Tennyson's poem is that he very successfully applied natural objects in his poem. That is, he introduces natural background against his ideas. He uses natural elements in his way to befit his subject matter. Whenever he needs to express some gloomy ideas, he uses cloudy atmosphere or foggy days. But whenever he wants to focus on the very optimistic or very brightening ideas, at the very moment he draws upon sunny days. So this is very scientifically explained the objects of nature in his poem by Tennyson. Okay, anyway, the main themes of the poem is the ideas of mortality, death, spirit of knowledge, and adventure. In the poem, we see that some ideas, life piled on life. That is, life piled on life, death after death. Lots of people are also injured and dead in the Trojan War. And after for a long 10 years, Ulysses saw different types of people meeting death, and he experienced a lot of sufferings. He had to face giant monster that is in the sea. So his life was full of experiences and knowledge, and he had to overcome a lot of challenges to reach his home or to win in the battle. That's why the spirit of knowledge and people's endeavor to go for knowledge, to explore new and newer world, is to be traced out in the poem. In the poem, we can notice some important lines so that we can understand what the poem contains or what the poet wants to mean by naming the poem with reference to mythological character Ulysses. I'll drink life to the lees. That is, this is a very single or simple line, speaks volume of words. That is, life has a meaning. So, to make life meaningful or successful, people should sacrifice time, labor, money in quest of knowledge, to find newer and newer world, to trace out different branches of knowledge, to explore different parts of the world. People must satisfy his unquenching thirst for knowledge. If they lead idle life, settling down in their native land or in their native home, they will never feel the taste of knowledge. They will never go beyond human capacity. The most striking lines of this poem are to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Yes, to strive, to seek, to find, not to yield. Not to surrender. Human life has much more capabilities, potentialities. Only going out of the house, finding a new way, experiencing the challenges that confront us with the people, human beings, can go after knowledge, can reach our target or goal. So, death closes all, but something at the end, some work of noble note may yet be done. Yes. This is the lines that Tennyson, through the mouth of Ulysses, utters before the readers, just to make the people or readers conscious, confident, and be more energetic. I told you that Tennyson suffered greatly with the loss of his close friend Arthur Hallam. Arthur Hallam was also engaged with the sister of Tennyson as I studied. So, with the death of his close friend, at the same time, the would-be husband of his sister, so mentally Tennyson broke down. That's why he need to gather mental strength within himself. So, to write a poem to recover from mental background, Tennyson has written such a renowned poem Ulysses, quoting a character from mythological story. So ultimately, the spirit of his own age, Victorian age, the yearning for knowledge of the Victorian people, the national trend of exploration of different parts of the world by Victorian people or by the ruling men of England at that time are also narrated indirectly in the poem in some famous lines that I have already mentioned before you. So, Tennyson is a representative poet. In his poem, through the mouth of Ulysses, he wants to convey the conflict between religion and science. That is, people started questioning the existence of religion in the upcoming scientific achievement. Even people at that time wanted to win our mortality with the newer and newer scientific achievement in medical science. In this poem, we also see that Ulysses was an aged man. After fighting for a long 10 years, he became definitely weak, but he became stronger and stronger mentally. Mentally, he was very young and energetic. So, whenever people were in search of knowledge and domination of new parts of the world, they must feel energetic and mentally strong enough to overcome challenges of physical drawbacks or disabilities that old age brings upon human beings. That is done or shown in the poem Ulysses by the character of Ulysses. In his old age, he did not sit idle. Rather, once again, he initiated a new journey with his followers or mariners. So, this is the spirit that Victorian people in Victorian age have shown. So, the loss of personal loss for which Tennyson mentally suffered a lot, he ultimately turned his personal loss into national strength. So, in the poem Ulysses, the trend of Victorian age, we can notice the conflict between religion and science, the conflict between democracy and autocracy is also found. The status of women we can also identify in the poem with reference to Penelope, wife of Ulysses. The wife of Ulysses, Penelope, is underestimated. She is considered as an object of only pleasure and old woman, only as a housewife. So, the Main characteristics of between age that prevail in that period, all the traits of between age more or less are to be noticed in the poem Ulysses. That's why Tennyson is a representative poet of between age. He's the spokesman. He's a national poet. He's very much influenced by the material success and scientific achievement of the between age. That's why he wanted to focus on that very spirit of between people in quest of gaining knowledge, finding new world, expanding more and more countries. And he is in favor of winning wealth and power of the people. But he is not totally detached or cut off from religious or moral values. He wanted to make a compromise between religion and science. That's why he is also called a poet of compromise. Compromise between science and religion, compromise between democracy and autocracy. In the poem, we see that he is also in favor of following religious values. There are some other poems written by Tennyson. In your next, that is third year, you might also study Tithonus, Inoni, Arthur. So there are some other poems in which we the readers can also find all the elements that I told you in this poem with reference to between age. So whenever you will start writing an answer of any question, you try to refer to the quotation or some reference to that textbook or poem that will make your answer very relevant and standard. So as it's a long poem, once again I am summarizing some important ideas. That is, Ulysses is a mythological character. Tennyson named the poem by mythological character Ulysses. In Roman it is Ulysses, in Greek it is called Odysseus. Ulysses is a heroic character. He fought in the Trojan War. After 10 years he returned home. He was a king of Ithaca, but he did not find pleasure in ruling his countrymen, living with his old wife and son. Rather, he initiated a new journey. So this is the spirit that Tennyson wants to mean, that in old age people can also start new life with exploration of new country. He cannot be satisfied with what he has. Man has indefinite or infinite potentialities and capabilities. Man can go beyond his reach. This is the spirit of between age, to go for scientific knowledge. But in the same way, we also find that Tennyson wants to mean that people must follow religious values. In maintaining relationship, people must follow religious values. That is, extramarital affair with other women is not to be followed by the people. In another poem, we also see that Tennyson wants to focus. So, in the poem, there are some lines: life piled on life, I'll drink life to the lees. Death loses all but something at the end, some work of noble note may yet be done. Yes, that is the end of life. But before dying, people must work nobly. People must search for knowledge. People must go for new world. So this is the spirit that is old age or physical incapabilities can never stand on the way. That is the highlighted through the character of Ulysses. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. To strive. People must endeavor or try. They should attempt to go for a newer world, to go for knowledge, to strive, to seek. Yes, we must find the way out. Sometimes we feel depressed, not finding the way, but if we try to find the way out, definitely we'll get the way. To seek, to find, then ultimately we'll find the way out. Not to yield, yes. Not to lose heart. Not to surrender, not to yield. Not to make a stop in the way of going for success. So this is the spirit that Tennyson wants to mean before the readers through the character of Ulysses. The beautiful description of nature in the poem is also a very important feature of Tennyson's poetry. He applied the romantic treatment of nature in his dramatic monologue because the objects of nature are beautifully drawn. The objects of nature are colorfully drawn in his poem. As we know that romantic poets treated nature in their poems very beautifully with different types of color. In the poem, we also see that Tennyson applied objects of nature colorfully with varying modes, but in the same way, his treatment of nature is very scientific and realistic. So, this is how I'm concluding my speech, as it's a long poem. So, little by little, you can go through the poem. You can need to study background of the poem, historical age of the poem. So, this is how you can prepare yourself. Thank you all. Stay home, stay safe, stay connected with all the classes of AMC online.